What happens when you go from able bodied to disabled almost overnight? In today's episode, author Jackie Norton shares what it means to live with long COVID, POTS, chronic fatigue, and the emotional weight of feeling like a burden. This conversation is raw, honest, and deeply validating, especially if you've ever had to grieve the body you used to have. You're listening to The Spoonful Show, honest conversations about chronic illness, identity, and finding meaning, even when life changes everything. I'm Rachel, a chronic illness spoonie, and I'm really glad you're here. Let's get started. So welcome, Jackie, to the podcast. I'm really excited to have you on today to talk about your book called Burden, A Year of Journals from Someone Living with Chronic Illness. How are you doing today?
I'm okay, as good as we can be.
That's right. That's right.
Yes. But thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
Oh, awesome. Good. So for our listeners who are just meeting you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and also what chronic illnesses you carry with you?
Sure, yeah. So I'm Jackie Norton, and like you said, I wrote the book Burden. I don't have much of like a background before this. I was diagnosed with long COVID I got long COVID in the end of 2021. And since then, I've been struggling with like the fact of like I was an able-bodied person and then now I'm disabled. And from long COVID, I got POTS and dysautonomia and chronic fatigue syndrome, and mast cell activation syndrome. And it's been a really long journey. So I didn't really have anybody around me to reach out or anything. So that's why I started to I didn't have anybody around me that had chronic illness or anything like that to sort of help me through this. So it was a very lonely journey at first. And that's why I decided to write the book. I started taking creative writing classes to help me write the book. And now I do have a TikTok and an Instagram page where I try to make like chronic illness and like writing and book content, and to try to get a good community together because we really all do need that support in the chronic illness community, I think.
Yeah, we sure do. And I'm going to read to our listeners. This caught me literally page 1 stopped me in my tracks. But you talk about, I decided to take the whole year into my own hands. I decided to make it about me. I decided to be selfish. I decided to say no and set boundaries. These are things I should have done a long time ago, but was too busy people pleasing, helping others with their own needs instead of focusing on myself. And I think a lot of us can resonate with that. I mean, like I said, it's just stopped me in my tracks. And I went, well, that's me. And I'm working out of trying to put others before myself. Yeah. But you decided then at that point to write your book Burden in a journal form and to specifically take a year for the book to come together. So what made you decide to write it in like a journal form rather than a traditional like memoir?
Yeah, I think I did it that way to sort of, I wanted it to be like somebody sort of just stumbled upon like a diary and sort of like, because I feel like the only way that you can sort of talk about chronic illness and to get your point across is to be like really honest and vulnerable with your experiences. That's the best way, I think, for connection. And also if you are healthy to be educated about it more, instead of like, not tackling the harder topics about it. And I also did it in a journal form for me as well. So it felt more therapeutic and I felt like I was venting and sort of being honest with myself as I was doing it. And it felt more personal to me that way than to just sort of write it as like a traditional
Hmm.
memoir. It felt more personal, more vulnerable, and I felt like it would connect to people more, and let people have like a deeper look into our lives than just like, you know, a surface level book.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I think that also probably writing it, it was much easier to sit down and focus on one day at a time versus trying to create
Yeah.
this book that, you know, seems more overwhelming than just saying, okay, I'm just going to talk about what
Yeah.
happened today, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's definitely what I did, because when I thought about it at first, I was like, that seems overwhelming, you know? And
Hmm.
my friend sort of helped me figure out like, okay, what's a good way to write it that doesn't stress me out, but still sort of gets our point across. And we came together and was like, I think just like writing journals. And if you skip a couple of weeks, you skip a couple of weeks. If you write a couple of weeks in a row, that's how you do it. And it was a lot of less pressure on myself to do it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. So your book starts just a couple weeks out of the hospital. Again, you talk about dealing with COVID, POTS, autoimmune flares, infected ulcers, all while trying to move out on your own. So many of us face so many things at once, and it can be so overwhelming. So talk about what it was like to face a lot of challenges and physical challenges, life changes all at once, and what gave you the strength to for that moment to be when everything started.
Yeah, that was a really overwhelming uh,
Yeah.
a couple of weeks right there. I had no intention in the beginning of that year to move. I had just gotten married a few months before that, and we were talking about it, but then I got into the flare and we just sort of kind of put it on hold. And that was when I was like, okay, I don't have anything going on. I'm just going to journal and start this book and go from there. Things going to be smooth and everything. But then a spot opened up in Salem and we've always wanted to live there. So we were like, we should go look at it. And then we agreed to it. And then everything sort of fell into place, but it was really overwhelming. I have two sides to that. Like, one, I probably should have waited a little bit to move, because I was dealing with a lot of stuff. I was in the middle of like the prednisone withdrawal, and I still had open ulcers on me, and it was really overwhelming. My husband had to basically like take control over everything and basically move us in and do all the work. But then on the other hand, it really helped with my mental health too, like having something to do. And I used to live sort of in the not in the middle of nowhere. But I lived sort of surrounded by woods, and there wasn't really a lot going on. And now I'm like in the middle of a city, so there's a lot more stimulation. And I think that it happened in a good way. I don't know, fate or something, but it was a good direction for the book as well, because it was sort of like, we have to, no matter if we're chronically ill, we have to deal with stuff. We have to move while we're chronically ill. We have to go to parties or to weddings or to whatever. We have to have a regular life still. So it was really cool and unexpected for me to like journal what it was like going through all this and being like, I thought moving would be a really happy time in my life, but it was really stressful. And
Mhm.
it's not like a rom-com like how you would see in movies and stuff. It's a lot harder than that. And that life doesn't just stop. So I thought it was a good, at the after it, I was like, no, that's a good way to start the book, because I thought my this year was going to be different, but now I'm like in this completely different world, and now I have to like figure everything out like a normal person would. But now I have chronic illness on top of that, and having to juggle all of these things, and showing the life that would be if you had chronic illness and you had to do all of these things too, like a regular healthy person would have to deal with them.
Mhm. Isn't it crazy that we don't have a pause button on chronic illness? Everybody
Yeah.
goes through those stressful times, but
Yeah,
gosh, it would be so nice to just have, a pause button where everything stopped. But, you
that would
know,
be amazing.
oh, that would
Yeah.
be amazing. Yes. But
Yeah.
so The word burden, and that's, like I said, the name of your book is Burden. Um,
Mhm.
if I could tell you how many times I use that specifically right after diagnosis, of that
Mm.
feeling, what made you decide to name it Burden? And why did that feel personal to you?
Yeah, so I had always, and I still struggle with, feeling like a burden to myself, the world, my family, my husband, because of my chronic illness. And now I have to be very dependent on other people. And um, I was a very independent person before this happened, so it was a very strong shift in my life. And I been in therapy for years, and I remember the first time I met my therapist and I told her that, I feel like I'm a burden to everybody. And she was like, "Did you ask to be sick?" And I was like, "No." She's like, "Did you go out of your way to get all these illnesses so you could, And I was like, "No." And she goes, "So it's not your fault." And she's like, "Chronic illness is a burden on you. It's not the other way around." And I was like, it like seems like common sense, but when you're in the mindset of thinking that you're a burden to everybody, it's not. So it shifted my perspective, um and using that title for the book, it sort of encompassed how I felt about myself, but also it was sort of like a wink to like the caregivers and the family and other people who are healthy that are reading the book, so you can see how we feel and how we feel about ourselves, and for hopefully for them to sort of be able to step in somebody else's shoes, and hopefully society can, help us feel like we're not a burden. And then for people who have chronic illness and they're reading it, I try to come across as, this is happening to you, you're not happening to it. And like the chronic illness itself is the burden, and you are not the burden. um so I tried to like have a whole bunch of different meanings behind it. And yeah, I felt that it fit, um what I wanted to get out of the book into just that one word.
Yeah. I think it's great. I mean, to pick one word that most spoonies feel going through
Yeah.
this chronic illness, that's a heavy one, and so I appreciate that, because Lord knows I went through my days where I felt
Oh
the
yeah.
same way. So yeah,
Yeah, of course, I feel like if it's a very common thing, like, you're if you went from healthy to not healthy and your whole world changed and I had to depend on other people, like it'd be a very normal reaction. Like
hmm
we shouldn't feel bad about that, because it's definitely such a valid reaction to having your life sort of flipped upside down.
hmm and to think about somebody, a non-spoonie, breaks their leg and has to be on crutches for a couple weeks, they may have those same feelings, but the difference
Yeah,
is this is our life now,
yeah,
and it's not going to be, a couple weeks on crutches and then we're going to be fine, and
yeah,
it's
yeah.
it can be really difficult. But your book captures the moment when your life shifts from independence to dependency.
Mm.
So, what was the hardest part about that, emotionally, specifically?
Whew. That it was tough. I feel like I said, I was a very independent person before this. I was going to college and like in person, and um like a normal 20-year-old, and then having to switch basically overnight to having to get pushed in a wheelchair, and now I can't drive myself anywhere, and somebody else has to cook for me every day, and all those things. Emotionally, I was grieving a lot, like my own life, which was very weird. to experience. And just a lot of sadness over the life that I had lost. And it is sort of like, I didn't really understand what the sadness was because it didn't feel like regular sadness. And then I saw somebody talk on Reddit about how they're grieving themselves. And I was like, that's the exact emotion I'm feeling, is grief. That's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, like what an interesting feeling. Like you shouldn't be able to grieve your own life, that's not something we're supposed to feel. And it was because like it was sort of like I had died and now I have this new life, but I wanted my old life back. And I still deal with the grief, but immediately going from being very independent to dependent, there is definitely a lot of grief involved that I feel like doesn't get talked about because no one ever talked to me about it. I had to sort of search it out, like, what am I feeling,
Mm-hmm.
and that definitely encompassed everything.
Are you looking for merch that speaks to your truth and makes you laugh? Spoonful of Strength has you covered, literally. From t-shirts and hoodies to mugs and magnets, every design is made for the chronic illness community with heart, humor, and a whole lot of strength. Funny? Check. Inspirational? You bet. Illness specific? Absolutely. And the best part? I can personalize any design or create a custom shirt for you for no extra charge. So whether you're laughing through the pain or wearing your diagnosis with pride, our designs are funny, fierce, and illness specific because being chronically ill doesn't mean being chronically boring. So if you want a sweatshirt that gets you, head to spoonfulofstrength.etsy.com. Now that's spoonful with 2 L's. Use code podcast for 20% off your entire cart.
Yeah. And you talk about grief for the life that you had and the things that you could do prior. But what about the grief of your body not behaving in the way that you're used to it? I know a lot of people, myself included, are like, I used to be able to do this and I used to be able to do that, or I'm gaining some weight because I'm not exercising. How did body grief show up for you?
Yeah, I always struggled when I was younger with like body dysmorphia and eating disorders, and I was always very like focused on exercise and what I was eating to like a really unhealthy point. But then after I got sick and I couldn't exercise anymore and I was gaining all this weight, like that's something that came up that I had to deal with now because I had gained like 80 pounds and the doctors were like, you have to stop forcing yourself to exercise because you're making yourself worse. Especially with like chronic fatigue syndrome, if you exercise too much, you can, make yourself worse. And it was hard to sort of be like, okay, I have to accept this now. And I gained the weight, I got stretch marks, my hair started to get thinner, and I started getting like like dark circles under my eyes, and like my whole appearance sort of changed, and I had to sort of go into like a radical like acceptance theory for that in therapy, and which I'm still doing because it's still hard to deal with, but also like I can like walk from the couch to the bathroom, but I can't like walk down the street. And so like seeing my body not be able to work in that way was hard because I used to be a Zumba instructor. I was a dance instructor. And so I went from that to not being able to go to the pharmacy by myself without getting pushed in a wheelchair. So it's like my whole body changed and I had to figure out its limitations. And I had to start like forcing myself to look in the mirror and be like trying to like what I see. But that's a struggle every day. And I don't think there's going to be like one day where that's gone away, but I'm definitely nicer to myself than I was in the beginning of all that, which is good. But that's one thing too that doesn't get talked about a lot is how drastic our bodies change, and that we just have to like be okay with that.
Yeah. I'm just now getting to the point where I can look at myself and be grateful that for everything that my body has been through, it's held up as much as it has, even though
Yeah.
I'm like you. It's, I can't walk and get groceries, and there's so many things that have limitations, but it's just getting to the point where you can say, okay, yes, my body's not doing what it should be, but it's going through a lot. So I
Yeah.
need to be grateful that it allows me to do the things that I can. But that's really hard. That's
Yeah, it
really hard to
is.
get to that
It
place.
is. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I'm always like mad at my body. But
Mm-hmm.
again, like my therapist is like, but your body is still here with you. Like it's getting you through all of this. And it's like, I know it's a hard
Yeah.
balance that we have to go through.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
feel like your body's giving up on you when in fact it's trying to support
Yeah.
even though it's going through all of this. But was there a particular journal entry that was especially difficult, where maybe you were more vulnerable and it was maybe a question of whether or not to include it? Or did you put it all
Yeah.
out there?
Yeah. I think the most vulnerable for me was the opening, because I was talking about my autoimmune disease and the flare that I was going through with the ulcers and stuff. And within, like, I don't know, the first couple of pages, I talk about how I can't go to the bathroom by myself at that moment. And I can't shower myself. And I use stronger language than that to be more descriptive
Mm-hmm.
about it. But
Yeah.
and I had a couple people read the first chapter, and a lot of them were like, I think you should take some of those words out, or make it a little bit more palatable for
Yeah.
people, because they might stop reading because it's so private. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like, and I thought about it, but I was like, no, I think I have to leave it, because I'm like, it's my story.
Let me ask you this. Did writing the book change the way that you see yourself?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. I think I think I from writing the book, I've definitely been more gracious with myself and more patient. Um, because like reading it back and like having to like read it and read it and read it and edit it and all that stuff, I had to like relive a lot of those moments, and I was nicer to myself. And ended up seeing myself as stronger than I thought that I was in the beginning of the book. It was like, wow, look at all the stuff that I wrote about, and I'm like still here, you know.
Mhm.
So I definitely think I got nicer to myself in general afterwards.
Talk about that for a second. I have dealt with like self-talk, negative self-talk. So how did you experience that and the way that you're seeing yourself change? And did you experience that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm the first person to critique myself with everything. So
Mm.
I'm always sort of like, when I started the journey, I was always like, oh, I hate my body. I hate this about myself. I'm a burden. I can't do anything. And then sort of like writing is very cathartic. And I think I was able to process a lot of it through writing, because I was able to, like, I don't know, think about it more deeply and analyze what was going on and how I handled it. And I think because I am in the book telling people that also have chronic illness, they need to be nicer to themselves at the end of it. I think I'm like, I can't give the advice and not take it, you know?
Right.
So I think that also helped as well. And then, of course, like I was in therapy for all of it too, and working on how I see myself and accept myself, and how I talk to myself, most importantly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So important. It's so important. Um, so looking back now, what do you wish the you at the beginning of writing this book, um, what do you wish that you knew?
Mm.
Something that you figured out along the way that the you today in this moment.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I think I wish that I knew that I would be able to more morbid answers, that I would be able to survive the year. Because I was always sort of being like, am I going to even make it? Like, and the other one is I think that it definitely solidified the fact that I am not a burden, because I was writing this book to tell other people that, and I was trying to tell myself that too, but still struggling with it the whole time. And I think afterwards, writing all these experiences down, I think that if I could, talk to my 2024 self, I would let her know that, like, just to reiterate that, like, you're gonna make it, and you're not a burden, and just to be nicer to myself, because I'm going through a lot.
It sounds like that you learned so much from writing this book. And I think it's so good the way you talk about, being able to reflect on it and kind of realizing all that you went through and realizing that you made it out. And we've talked before about, journaling and writing and how it can be really healthy. And I think that's one great way to be able to write and look back and see the things that you made it through, and kind of realizing that. I'm glad you had the chance to do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
This book was released in September of last year. So how have readers responded to the book? What's some feedback?
I was so nervous to put it out there. But the response has been really nice. I've met a lot of really cool, like, chronic illness content creators out of it. And I've had people message me, like, randomly on Instagram, be like, oh, I found you. You're the person who wrote the book. And they'll tell me, like, their whole life story and how it relates to what I wrote about, and make friends that way. And I became, like, pen pals with a few people because of it. And the most important thing I think that has been said to me about it is I feel less alone. People have said that they feel validated, and that they've given it to people in their family after they've read it, so they could, like, their parents or their partner can understand them better and be able to help take care of them better. And I've actually had, like, a few husbands message me after they've read their book for their wives and been like, I can now be a better partner for my wife now, because I can understand what's going on. And I was just, like, taken aback and, like, to tears, because I was like, this is, like, everything I wanted.
Yeah. Oh,
So it's been really nice.
it's such a good point. I'm so glad that that's happening for you, that people are actually giving it to non-chronic illness people or family and friends, because it is such a great insight into what someone with chronic illness goes through. And it's so honest and raw and so truthful. And so that is awesome. For somebody that's living with chronic illness who feels like a burden, what do you want them to hear? Obviously, number one, they need to read your book. But number two, what do you want them to know?
Oh, I think that they didn't ask for this. That's basically what I tell myself every day is, I didn't ask for this. You didn't ask. Nobody would ask for this. So to just be more gentle with themselves, and to know that it's not their fault. And sometimes bad things happen to good people. And I think that's important too, because I would always get into my magical thinking out and be like, I must be a horrible person if this horrible thing has happened to me, And I'm like, no, that's not how the world works. Unfortunately, like, because if you're a good person, you just have a good life, But I think that's the most important thing, is just to know that, like, you didn't ask for it, and just to be more kind to yourself.
Okay, so let me ask you one more question about your book. If you we're in January right
Sure.
now, starting off a new year. If you had to start another book, what do you think the name of it would be?
That's a tough question. I don't know the single word, but maybe something along the lines of like, because right now I just posted on my Instagram that my New Year's resolution is to sort of make a life for myself outside of my illness. And so I'm not like pretending I'm healthy or anything. But like trying to find things that I can do in my disabled body that can bring me joy,
Mm.
whether that's like going to the movie theaters more or like doing like finding out what I can do. And so maybe something along that line of um, journaling about what it's like to try to find different hobbies and to have some sort of joy within life while you're still being disabled. And
Mm.
because a lot of our life revolves around like going to doctor's appointments and medications and all this stuff,
Yep.
and even if it's just like playing a video game or something small, like just to figure out like what we can do to just bring some more dopamine in our lives. That's what my goal is for this year. So maybe something around
Oh,
that would
that's
be good.
awesome. I love
Yeah.
that. Well, tell our listeners where they can follow you on social media and where they can buy your book, Burden.
Yeah, sure. I have a TikTok and an Instagram. I am more active on the Instagram. And it's at Jackie with two E's at the end because my middle name is an E. So Jackie E. Norton. Um, and you can buy the book from Amazon. It's on Kindle Unlimited. If you have the subscription, you can read it for free. And on Barnes and Noble online, they have it there too.
I definitely recommend this book for somebody who is kind of stuck in that, maybe newly diagnosed, but just kind of
Yeah.
all of the feelings that come along with diagnosis and the changing of your body and all of the different things that happen as you sort through your diagnosis. So it's definitely a must read
Thank
on
you.
my list. I really enjoyed it. And I really appreciate you being here. This was when I saw the name of your book, before I even had it in my hands, I was like, ooh, this one's good, because this one just the title of it brought up a lot of feelings and memories. And I thought, well, this is something that I can relate to. Thank you so much. I really,
Thank
really
you.
enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I feel honored. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I want to thank Jackie for sharing her story, her book, and being so honest and vulnerable. I think what stands out most in this conversation is that chronic illness doesn't just change your body, but it changes your identity, your relationships, and the way that you see yourself. I know I'm not the only one who had the thoughts of, I feel like such a burden. But even throughout all of that, there's still resilience, creativity, and connection. If you're listening today and you've ever felt like a burden, I hope you hear this clearly. Your existence is not a weight. Your needs are not too much, and you deserve support. So make sure and check out Jackie's book, Burden. I'll have it linked in the show notes, and connect with her online. And as always, thank you for saving some spoons to be with me today. Until next week, take care.
Thank you for listening to The Spoonful Show. Follow the podcast so you never miss an episode. Leave a rating, review, and comment. Connect with me on Instagram at Spoonful of Strength and TikTok at spoonful.of.strength. Remember, that's spoonful with 2 L's. Shop customized t-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, mugs, and more on our Etsy shop at spoonfulofstrength.etsy.com and use code podcast for 20% off your entire cart.